Well, hello there. I haven't recorded a video for you in a while because things are going along pretty well. You're doing a very good job of getting me the information that I need when it is your turn to lead the discussions. The references that you're giving me out of SHRM have been very good. The discussion questions have been very good. The talking points have been very good. And it's been enjoyable to look through the discussion boards and to read what you're putting to see how you're interacting with your peers. And there really hasn't been much of an opportunity or need for me to do videos along the way. But we're coming to something that needs a little bit of clarification. I want to make sure that I am open with you at the start so that you know exactly what I'm looking for. As an aside, I'm in the process of reading and providing some feedback on the professional papers that you wrote. And I'm delaying a little bit in putting the grades in and releasing the grades because I need to go back and look at what I wrote in the instructions and what I said in the video, because there's some things that some of you are doing that others are not doing. And I want to make sure that before I tag the ones who didn't do certain things, that I made it really clear what I was looking for. So I want to make sure in this video that you know exactly, with no doubts whatsoever, what I'm looking for in the issue paper, which is the second piece of the three-part project that you're working on. You'll remember that in the first piece you identified a company and a person that you're going to be working with. And you told me a little bit about that company, a little bit about that person. You told me a little bit about what they see going on in the world, what's going on in their company. And then at the very end of it, you identified one or more issues that they're trying to figure out how to resolve. And what I'm hoping that you're going to be able to do with that is to read over that section of issues and pick one of them to step in and play the role of consultant for and help them solve. Now, before we really get into the details of what this looks like, I got to really stress to you that you think in terms of HR and that the issue that you try to solve is actually an HR issue. It's not an operations issue. It's not a strategic issue. It's not a physical plant issue or an accounting issue or things like that, that it is actually an HR responsibility. So, for example, somebody was talking in one of the papers about trying to figure out how to put more people into a particular location so that we could expand our staff. Well, the physical placement of desks is not an HR issue. How we find those people, how we train those people, how we create job descriptions for those people, how we create pay ranges for those people, those are HR issues. But not the physical placement of desks, not the utilization of space. That's more of an operations issue. So if you're thinking about whether or not your particular issue is going to work for this, put it up against the kinds of things we've been talking about so far in our discussions. Does it have to do with with benefits or compensation? Does it have to do with motivation? Does it have to do with training? Does it have to do with recruiting? Does it have to do with rewarding? Or any of those kinds of things? Or is it something that there is a particular issue? How do we get better diversity? That would be an HR issue. How do we recruit people who are diverse or different from us? That's an HR issue. Make sure that that issue that you identified at the end of the professional paper is something that actually senior management will come to HR and say, you guys handle this. Now, with that in mind, what you're going to do in this paper is start doing some research in SHRM. Now, you may find great things outside of SHRM. For my practical purposes in this paper, anything you find outside of SHRM is completely irrelevant. And if you want to include it, it doesn't necessarily help you in terms of the grading. What really helps you in terms of grading is finding stuff in SHRM that relates to that. Now, if you're doing an issue that is in line with something we've already talked about in a discussion board, a lot of your research is already done. You just got to go back and reread the articles and make your own notes on them. But if it's something that we haven't talked about yet, you got to start doing some research. First thing you'll need to remember, with this particular paper, it's due at 11 p.m. on the last day of October, so October the 31st. We've got about 3.5 weeks ahead of us to be working on this thing. Plenty of time, but it's due at 11 p.m. on the last day of October. Your Dropbox has to be in by that date. Make sure that you keep that in the back of your mind. Anything beyond that, we start really getting into some discussions of how much credit should I give on this, what's reasonable when you've had a 3-week, 3.5-week notice if it ends up being late, that sort of thing. All right, now at this point, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and open the assignment Dropbox and maybe print out what's in the instructions and have it handy right there in front of you. Also, scroll down the page and look at, maybe print out the rubric that's going to go along with the grading and have those available for you. You might pause the video right now and print those things, and then we'll talk about those things and I'll elaborate a little bit on what I'm looking for. I would presume at this point, although a second and a half has passed for me, that you have paused the video, that you've printed out those things, maybe 5 or 10 minutes has elapsed, but you're ready to talk about these things. Notice first of all in the instructions that I am, again, looking for 3 pages. I don't want 4, 5, 10. I don't want a term paper. I don't want a summary sheet, an executive summary. I want a 3-page paper. And that means that you're going to write all of page 1, all of page 2, and somewhere on page 3 you're going to stop. It would probably be somewhere between the 1/4 and the 3/4 mark on that 3rd page, but it will be on the 3rd page. 3 pages. There are 3 major sections, 2 of which are incredibly short. Now, what I want to see on this paper when I open it up to start reading and grading, you should open a brand new clean Word document, and on the very top line of the first page, type your name. Then hit enter, and on the second line of that page, type the word issue. Then hit enter and type me a short paragraph. So the only wasted space on that entire page is line 1, which has your name, and line 2, which has the word issue. In the issue, I want you to start off with a very, very clear statement that I have absolutely no way to question what it is you're trying to do here. You're going to say something like, the issue that I will be consulting on for this company is blank. It may be is helping to create a policy about harassment or bullying. It may be helping to determine which of 2 benefits makes the most sense for the company. It may be helping to develop a recruitment plan to get a more diverse workforce. It may be trying to figure out, I don't know, I'm running out of ideas right now, but I should have absolutely no idea after reading the very first sentence of your paper what it is that you're going to be doing. And this is going to fall into the end of the semester project. After that first sentence, the issue that I'm going to be consulting with for my company is blank, then I want 2 or 3 sentences where you kind of remind me what you put at the end of that professional paper. The company that I'm working with has been dealing with this kind of an issue, and here are the things that cause them to believe that this is an issue. But that's probably 3 sentences out of the whole page. When you get to the end of that, and you may only still be a 1/4 of the way down page 1, then you're going to go to a new line and you're going to put something to the effect of SHRM resources and then drop to another line. So there's a second major heading. Now you're going to have the rest of page 1 and all of page 2 and part of page 3 where you start talking about what you've read in the SHRM resources. I want to stress, and I did in the instructions, that I'm not looking for APA format here. You don't have to put the author's name and the year in the parentheses. You don't have to put the title of the article and the year in the parentheses for this particular paper because it's SHRM stuff and it doesn't always have an author. All I really want you to do is to collect your SHRM articles. It's 5, it's 7, it's 12, however many it is. Put the links to those articles from SHRM on a page and number them 1 through 7. They don't have to be in any order. They don't have to be alphabetical. They don't have to be by last name. They don't have to be anything except on that page. But you're going to want to number them 1 through 3 or 1 through 7 or 1 through 40 or however many there are. Now, when you talk about that article in your paper, in the body here, under this SHRM Resources section, you're going to talk about what that article said in your own words, summarizing the main ideas. And then you're going to put parenthesis 1, close parenthesis, or open parenthesis 3, close parenthesis. And that's going to be your reference to let me know what part of that SHRM Resources section of your paper is a particular article on that last page. So again, no APA, formal APA references, just kind of make an allusion to that article with a number in a parenthesis. So you talk through the course of 2 good pages where you give me the highlights of what these 6 or 5 or 2 or 7 or whatever number of SHRM articles talk about related to this particular issue. What you're trying to do in this section is to build your knowledge of what's going on in the real world. What are HR people talking about related to this issue? If you can find things that help to define the problem, that's great. If you can find things that deal with how people have solved this problem, that helps you out an awful lot. Because in the final project, when you do your oral presentation at the end of the semester, you're going to have to talk me through what you're going to do to solve this problem, or what you're recommending as the consultant. So knowing what other people have done helps you. Knowing what the steps are helps you. Knowing what the costs are, the benefits are, the timeline is, the obstacles, how we get buy-in on this particular thing. All that helps you. So those are the kind of things you're looking for in this section. You're going through the logical process of solving this issue or resolving this issue. Let's see, as I look through my notes here, make sure that you do not plagiarize. You don't want to copy and paste out of these things. You want to put it in your own words. All right, so you've gone through the rest of page 1, all of page 2, part of page 3. You've kind of finished talking about however many articles that you've gotten from the SHRM resource. I'm really kind of targeting 7, but you make the decision on what you want to write about. Then you go to a new line, and you're going to put the word proposal summary or proposal or something like that, and then drop to a new line. And like you did in section 1, where you said the issue that I'm going to be consulting with on this company is blah, blah, blah. At this point, under proposal summary, you're going to say, to help resolve this issue, I am going to propose that we do blank. And then you're going to say, like, the issue was that we need a policy on bullying in our organization. You're going to say, in order to help resolve this issue, I'm going to propose that we create a formal policy about bullying. It may be almost word for word what you put in section 1, but it may be that in the course of the SHRM resources section, you've really kind of focused in on a slightly different way to approach this thing. But I want you to tell me exactly, in a sentence, what it is you're going to be proposing. And then in 2 or 3 sentences, maybe talk a little bit about what you think you're going to do in order to make that happen. We're going to look at this particular wording for this policy, or we're going to work through this process of delivering it to people. But that'll be maybe kind of the outline of the proposal that you're going to do at the end of the semester. All right? When you get to the end of that, it's probably no more than 3 or 4 sentences at the most. It may be a paragraph that is 2 inches long on your page. You're still on page 3 somewhere. You're going to end it. That's as simple as it gets. 3 sections. All of those sections have a heading, issue, SHRM resources, and proposal summary. It should not be difficult at all for me to know when you transition from one thing into the other, because there's a heading that tells me that you're changing topics. You're changing focus areas of this paper. All right, when you get to the end of that, you want to save it under what, and I don't really care what you call it, save it under something, and then make sure that your list of SHRM references is on a separate piece of paper under a separate file name. It should not. Let me re-emphasize that. You do not want your reference page to be page 4 of this document. You want it to be a separate page in its own document. When you go to submit this to the Dropbox, you're going to submit 2 files. One file will be a 3-page paper, and one file will be a 1-page reference sheet. Why is that important? Because I have instructed GeorgiaView to run this paper, the 3-page paper, through Turnitin.com. Now, please understand, you do not have to submit it to Turnitin.com. You just submit it to the Dropbox, and this happens in the background. But it's going to check to see if you've plagiarized anything. And it's going to come back with an originality score. I need to talk about that for a second if you're not familiar with it. It would suggest to you that a high number is good, because that would suggest that 95% of this is original. But in reality, it works in reverse. The higher the number, the worse you are. The lower the number, the better you are. So you want to come out with an originality score that's in the single digits, because that means that much of it has been found somewhere else. And so the lower the better. Part of your grade is going to be taking into account how much of this is your original idea or your rewording of somebody else's original idea. All right, so as far as the instructions go, the directions, the formatting and whatnot, similar to the last time, it's going to be Calibri font. It's going to be 11-point typeface. It's going to be 1.5 spacing. You're going to have the 3 headings. You're going to have the references on a separate page. That's 5 things: the font, the size, the headings, the references on a separate page, and the 1.5 spacing. Each one of those things is worth 2 points. So very, very easily, you got 10 points on this thing already. Let's see here. I think that's the basics of the instructions. Now let's take a minute and talk about that rubric. The issue is going to be worth 5 points. I'm going to grade it as very good, pretty good, or poor. There shouldn't be a lot of opportunity to get poor. There may be some pretty goods, there may be some very goods. It depends on how well you really get to the point and tell me what it is that you're trying to do and how well you write it. So a lot of 5s and a lot of 3s. On the SHRM review, that's the bulk of the paper. That is worth 50 points out of the 100 points total for this paper. 50 points means I couldn't find anything wrong with it. There's no grammar errors, there's no spelling errors, the thoughts are good, you've referenced things in a good way, you've pulled out the main ideas, and you did an outstanding job. If I think that you did an A job, there's little things here and there. It's going to be worth 45 out of 50. If it's a B job, it's 40 out of 50. If it's a C job, it's 35 out of 50. So as long as you write it well, you really get into the meat of what's going on, you summarize it pretty well, and you present a good case for what's going on related to this issue, shouldn't be hard to get 50, 45, or 40, probably at the very least. It's if you just seem to be wandering around with no aim, really, or if you write very, very poorly, then you might be looking at a C on that thing. But probably a lot of A's, a lot of B's, maybe some perfect papers if you do extremely well. The proposal at the very end is worth 10 points. That sets the stage for the last piece of this big project. The degree to which you very specifically and concisely and unarguably tell me what the proposal is that you're going to be making and give me the framework within which you're going to work is worth either 10, 9, 8, or 7. Perfect, A, B, or C. Again, a lot of A's, some B's, maybe a few perfects if you've done an outstanding job of putting it all together. So that is 50 or 65 points out of the 100 for this paper. Where do the other 35 come from? Well, you get, I'm telling you that I'm hoping for 7 articles out of SHRM. You're going to get 1 point for each of the articles that is referenced in the paper and listed on the back page in the separate document. 1 per article, so up to 7 points for including 7 articles. If you can't find 7, you can get 5 out of 7. It doesn't probably really significantly impact your grade overall to not get the full 7 points there. But I'm trying to kind of push you in the direction of doing a little bit more research. So 7 points, or 6 or 5 or 4 or 3, depending on how many articles you reference in your paper. 10 points, as I said, for the 5 formatting things, 2 points each, 1.5 spacing, 11-point Calibri, the 3 headings, the reference page on a separate document, and then grammar or spelling. I'm actually going to be going through here reading these things, circling things, and making little notations in the margin where I see spelling errors or where I see grammar errors. I won't try not to look for things like I would have put a comma here, but if you've missed a word or if the sentence doesn't make sense, it's a fragment, if there's spelling errors, those are going to start adding up, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to count those things. The total of spelling and grammar errors added together. And then, as you see on the rubric there, whichever category falls in, 2 or fewer, 3 to 5. I miscopied something on the page that I printed out, so what you're looking at is going to be different. The 7 out of 8 is going to be 3 to 5. Actually, I got to go back and redo this thing. I can't tell you what that is, but you'll see by the time that you look at this thing what the numbers are that gets you various numbers of points. And then the originality score. If it's 0 through 5, you're going to get 10 out of 10. If it is 6 through 10, you're only going to get 7 points. If it is 11 to 15, you're going to get 5 points. And if your originality score is higher than 15, that means that a substantial amount of your paper is word for word from somewhere else. So you won't get any points for that. So you could potentially lose 10 points, which is a letter grade, if you do too much that is word for word. Now, I'm going to allow myself some subjectivity here, because the way that Turnitin works is not just that it looks for an entire sentence that comes from somewhere. If there is a block of 4 or 5 words, it's going to highlight it. And I'm going to use my good judgment there. the fact that you have got a 7 on this doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get 7 out of 10. I'm going to look at where it finds the overlap. And if it just doesn't seem to me that there's another way that you can really rephrase that 4-word block, I'm not going to let that count against you. So do the best you can, but don't get too stressed out. Now, one thing that I'll suggest to you is that I have told the computer to tell you what that originality score is, but it doesn't happen right away. It's got to go out there and compare it to stuff in order to come back with that number. So what I would suggest to you is that well before the deadline, and I'm thinking, several days, a week before the deadline, you submit your files, and then you go on and you do something else for a few hours or maybe until tomorrow, and then you come back and you open up that assignment box and you see what the score is that it assigned. And if it's higher than you want it to be, you go back into your paper. I don't know if it'll tell you where it found the mistakes or the overlap or not, but you go back in and you work on rewording parts of it here and there and see if you can cause that number to be lower. Now, I'm going to encourage you to only submit your paper twice. Submit it once, make whatever corrections, submit it a second time, and let that be the end of it. If your first one has a 12 and you go back in and you revise it and you submit it and it's an 11, let the 11 be it. I don't want to have to sort through 4 or 5 or 6 different versions of your paper. I want there to be at most 2 out there. And if you do a real good job of phrasing this stuff correctly the first time, you won't even have to redo it at all. But I'm giving you that option to see what the number is, to decide if you want to revise it a little bit to lower that number, and to submit a cleaner second version, with the limit being 2 versions of that paper. Your paper, the attachment that has the references is probably going to be like 90 or 100% on the originality score. That's irrelevant. I'm not even going to look at that number. I'm just looking at the number on that 3-page paper that you're submitting. So the fact that one of them is really high, don't let it bother you. If you're copying and pasting the www. blah, 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 blah reference for that particular article, it's going to be exactly the same as somebody else did it last week. So there will be a lot of overlap. Don't worry about that. All right. If you have questions, you can either post something to the Ask Dr. Grimes discussion board in our class, or you can email me. Otherwise, I hope that between the instructions that I put in the Dropbox and this video that's gone on forever, that you've gotten the answers to your questions, and you know how to structure your paper, you know what to write about, and you know what the objective is. Again, if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll close this video for now, and I'll let you get to work on your paper.